What is the strangest mystery that is still unsolved? An unknown group of people broke into an FBI building. And no one has found out who they are. But the best part of the story is, they did it by leaving a sticky note that said "Do not lock the door tonight," and it worked. Edit. To everyone asking how they left the note. They just stuck the note to the front door. Probably should have specified. Edit 2. I'm an approved member of R. What's the rule now? Edit 3. I know it's been solved. I heard about it 8 years ago. And never learned that it was solved. This is my favorite weird and barely known one. Back in 2013, an unknown group assaulted a power substation in California. By all appearances it was pretty sophisticated, scouted firing positions. All casings wiped of prints. They targeted transformers so they'd take time to overheat before triggering any alarms. Also knew exactly when the police would arrive. No suspect or motive to this day. They also cut some fiber optic cables in a vault nearby. Conspiracy types think it was a dry run by Russia or possibly China to see how effective an attack like that might be. Who was Perseus? From 1943 to 1946. The Soviet Union had a high-level spy in the Manhattan Project. Codenamed Perseus. This spy was a scientist at the White Sands missile testing site in NM. And the main research facilities in Los Alamos. Perseus saw pretty much the entire project start to finish, giving the Russians everything they needed to get to work on their own bomb. The fact that they were able to do so within 4 years of the end of World War II, when their nations was still devastated, is proof positive that Perseus helped a great deal. And to top it all off, Perseus was never caught or positively identified. What on earth happened to the Tromp family? So it's this Australian family who owned a berry farm. Somehow Mr. and Mrs. Tromp and their 3 grown kids developed the belief that they weren't safe and they needed to flee their farm without cell phones or anything traceable, credit cards, etc. It sounds like the oldest son wasn't sold on whatever it was that led them to flee. He brought his phone. But eventually it got tossed from the car. He ended up bailing first and taking a train home. From there the rest of the family slowly separated and suffered various degrees of emotional breaks. The 2 girls stole a car. Somehow they got separated and one made it home. But the other was found on the floor in the backseat of some guy's car in a catatonic state. He spotted her after he started down the road. Eventually the parents were found wandering around aimlessly. Fortunately they were all okay physically, but WTF happened? Was someone actually after them? Were they delusional? As far as I know, the family hasn't released any updates. The whereabouts of the last Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller. The last verified sighting of him was in Berlin roughly 3 days before it fell. He had stated he knew full well what the Russians did to prisoners and he had no intentions of being captured. As chief of the Gestapo, he more than likely had access to foreign documents as well as ways to replicate them. Both the CIA and the KGB spent time looking for him, but no trace has ever been found. Asha Degree. Girl leaves her house in the middle of the night during a storm and disappeared. The only problem is that she was terrified of thunder and lightning and had no motive for leaving because her home life was fine. Then her clothes and backpack were found a year later in an abandoned construction site. The USS Cyclops, a coal ship, disappeared with 306 men. The largest U.S. Navy loss of life that didn't involve combat. Nice try, Netflix. You have to find interesting unsolved mysteries yourself. The suicide of Ellen Greenberg. 27 stab wounds in different areas of the body. Edit. 20 stab wounds. 27 was her age at the time of death. Thanks for correcting you, CMART 4165. Will the Delphi murders ever be solved? Who was the man on the bridge behind them? Edit. Oh my goodness. My first gold thingy, awards. Thanks. Edit 2. Here is a source Logreen does a good write-up over at r, True Crime Discussion, although I don't think it's been updated. Which of the 3 astronauts aboard Apollo 10 was responsible for the floating turd? There are a few that bug me. The Solder children. Their house burned down in the middle of the night. Several of the kids were presumed dead. But their bodies were never found in the debris and it never burned hot enough to cremate them. It started to look extremely suspicious and the parents until their deaths believed that they had been taken for some reason. Many years down the line they did receive a photo and cryptic note from someone claiming to be their son, but it was never authenticated. The boy in the box. A deceased little boy. Found beaten. Recently shaved of his hair and abandoned in the box for a bassinet that he was way too old for. The photos and reconstructions of him released to the public in the desperate hope of identifying him are haunting. The St. Louis Jane Doe. A little girl found in an abandoned house. Decapitated and bound at the hands. They have no dental records or facial reconstruction to go from. The case has led nowhere. She's just nameless. Lost to time. Tri-state crematory. A devastating case of a man called back from his college football career to take over his father's business when the father fell ill. Over time people started noticing bodies and body parts on the grounds, just hanging around. When someone finally took the reports seriously, they found that he'd been piling bodies up randomly all over the property. Often when it would have been much easier to cremate them instead of hauling them around to where they were dumped. The guy gave families canisters of cement dust instead of ashes. The mystery on this one is why? The guy never gave up the answer to what happened there and will only insist that there are no answers. His lawyer theorized he had mercury poisoning from cremating amalgam fillings. But that doesn't really explain why you would dump a body instead of cremating it when the latter takes less effort. The West Memphis 3 case. All of the satanic panic mess obscured so much that will probably go unanswered now. A bloody man covered in mud stumbled into a Bojangles the night those little boys went missing. Cops barely investigated that incident and lost the blood evidence they did collect regarding it. What was going on with John Mark Byers and Terry Hobbs? Two dads of two of those kids. Both turning up with evidence and acting at different points like they may have been involved? Where the ever-loving crap are all the severed human feet coming from? Lars Matank. A German tourist on vacation in Bulgaria. He got into a fight and the medical complications kept him from going home on a flight with his friends. Staying behind. It looks like his mental state unraveled completely over the course of a few days. Increasing paranoia eventually culminating in his complete disappearance into a field of sunflowers. What happened to Brian Schaefer? This happened in my hometown. This med student went to a bar with friends and then fully disappeared off the face of the earth. Edit. The podcast True Crime Garage has an incredible series on this case. The hosts are both from Columbus and around Brian's age. They talk through the whole case in depth and they also have a few guests that they talk with as well. That one time when the PM of Australia went to the beach. The Overtoun Bridge. It's a bridge in Scotland where dogs always unexplainably jump off. It's very strange and nobody knows for certain why they do this. Dogs who survived reportedly walked back up and jumped off again. They even had to put up a warning sign to keep your dog on a leash and to watch them. A lot of theories say maybe it's because of certain scents or animals down below. But most people have disagreed with this theory. It's fucking weird. Edit. In reality, I've done more research thanks to some comments. And it seems like people have romanticized this to make it creepier than it actually is. I don't know exactly what to believe since there's so much misinformation out there. But I'll just believe the articles who've done the most research for now. They say it was most likely not hundreds of dogs. Because they can't find reports of that many jumping off like the legend says. It was only around 6. So it's likely that I was misinformed like so many other people were and it's not actually a huge phenomenon lol. But it's still sad and a bit weird that 6 dogs jumped off. As someone from Chicago who loves unresolved mysteries, I would say the Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion. And I don't think we will ever find out who was behind it. It's been over 30 years and we still have no idea who was behind that incredibly bizarre hijack. There was a thread a while ago of someone that thought they had figured it out that seemed very possible. But it was updated and they were ruled out as suspects. Here is the infamous video for those that have never seen it. That guy who ran away from the airport hopped the fence and was never seen again. The guy's motive for shooting up all those people in Vegas. The Boötes Void is a region of outer space that contains no galaxies or stars and we don't know why. Oh god. Here I go on another 2-hour binge of reading every comment in the thread. The Tamam Shud case, also known as the mystery of the Somerton Man, is an unsolved case of an unidentified man found dead at 6:30 a.m. the 1st of December 1948, on the Somerton Park beach, just south of Adelaide, South Australia. The case is named after the Persian phrase tamam shud, meaning ended or finished, which was printed on a scrap of paper found months later in the fob pocket of the man's trousers. The scrap had been torn from the final page of a copy of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, authored by 12th-century poet Omar Khayyam. Tamam was misspelled as Taman in many early reports, and this error has often been repeated, leading to confusion about the name in the media. At the start of lots of chapters of the Quran there are mysterious groups of letters. No one knows what they mean, although there are lots of theories. The Salish Sea Feet or the Mad Axeman of New Orleans. The Salish Sea Feet are the approximately 20 dismembered feet found in or around British Columbia or Washington, USA. The feet sometimes are found still inside of shoes. No one knows how they got there or where they came from. Over the course of the last 13 years, the authorities have ruled out foul play. The Mad Axeman of New Orleans ran rampant in 1918 and 1919. He murdered 6 people, usually those of Italian descent, with axes or straight razors. In March of 1919, he sent a lengthy letter from hottest hell that was pretty nonsensical. But the most relevant paragraphs read, "Now, to be exact, at 12:15, earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music. And I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe." There were no murders that night because every dance hall in NOLA was filled to capacity. 3 lighthouse workers with impeccable mustaches traveled to a remote island on December 7, 1900 for a lighthouse shift that should have lasted for 2 weeks. When a boat arrived to pick them up, they were gone. No trace of the bodies. And the lighthouse was strangely locked. Not only was the setting normal, meal ready to be served, but there was no fire in the fireplace. And the clock stopped. One of the men kept a log in a diary. And he said that the seas were rough one day. But when monitored, it was actually calm. No one knows what happened to them. Source 2 skip to 443. Edit. The mustaches have nothing to do with the story at all. I just really liked them. The Hinterkaifeck murders. Super creepy, and the fact that there was evidence the murderers were in the house watching the family for a while before killing them just totally freaks me out. Edit. Thanks for the silver. First time award recipient here. And gold too. Happy almost cake day to me. How TF Jesus found people in the Middle East named Mark, Matthew, Luke, ADN John. Malaysian Flight 370. The identity of and what happened to D.B. Cooper. A man on a plane called himself D.B. Cooper and claimed to have a bomb-in-use suitcase. He took the flight crew hostage, and when he got the money he asked for, he had the flight crew start flying again. Eventually he jumped out of the plane with a couple of parachutes and the money. No one knows where he went or if he even survived. The Konkala Pass in Ladakh. This region lies in the disputed border of India and China, and is truly the most inaccessible places in the world. In 1962, the armies of both the countries were engaged in a severe conflict. After this, both China and India entered into an agreement according to which none will be allowed to patrol the region, but can keep an eye on it from a distance. After this, a popular belief floated that the Konkala Pass in Ladakh is a hideous base of UFOs. The area has forever remained a no-man's land due to its territorial limits, and is the reason why the UFOs have chosen it as their operational base. Reportedly, many have seen these UFOs, and both the Indian and Chinese governments are aware of these developments. In 2006, Google Maps too baffled the world with some images that looked like military facilities. But till date the whole issue remains mysterious and unexplainable. In 1977 we received a radio signal from outer space that lasted about 72 seconds. To this day, we still do not know where it originated from. Why people keep pouring money into a hole in the ground on Oak Island. If you ask me, greater than tilde less than. In 1994, close to 100 school children, 60 on record, described seeing a disc-shaped craft land behind their school during morning break time in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. Many of them interacted with beings that fit the gray alien description, with the children receiving what is described as some sort of telepathic communication. They all still stick to their stories today. Example 1. Example 2. Example 3. Here is the original footage of the interviews with the kids at the school, 30 minutes. The 1987 Arkansas murders of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. The Circleville letters. In 1976, residents of the small city south of Columbus, Ohio began receiving handwritten sinister and graphic letters. Each letter included secret and dark details about their personal lives. One resident received a ton of letters accusing her of various unsavory acts. The author warned the resident that he had been keeping an eye on her home, as well as her comings and goings. The resident was horrified and tried to keep the letters a secret until her husband began receiving them. The attacks on the family continued, with large posters appearing around town spreading rumors about their 12-year-old child. One day in 1977, the husband left the house after receiving a call from who he thought was writing the letters. A few minutes later, the husband was found dead at the end of the street, dead behind the wheel. The sheriff had ruled it a homicide when he realized that a single shot had been fired before the accident. But there was no evidence that the husband was shot at the site. The sheriff found the husband was twice the legal limit and ruled it a drunk driving accident. The letters began once again, this time accusing the sheriff of covering up the true nature of the death. The letters also accused the sheriff of mishandling an investigation into the county coroner, who had been accused of other grotesque acts. The harassment continued, this time with signs along the road, and in 1983, the original resident who had been accused of having an affair pulled over to remove a sign. During the effort to remove the sign, she discovered a box was attached and inside of it was a small pistol. The gun was part of a booby trap designed to fire when the sign was removed. Paul Freshour was arrested and given 25 years. But one small problem. The letter writing continued even after Freshour was put in jail. In a new batch of letters, the author had promised to dig up the grave of a deceased baby and mail the bones to the police in the case of another potential affair turned murder. Hundreds of residents continued to receive personal letters until 1994, when everything stopped. Death of Ray Rivera. Found dead in a meeting room in a hotel. Fell through the roof. The last call he received was from his office, but the company placed all employees under a gag order so no one can talk to police. Where the fuck are all the 10mm sockets going into hiding? Possibly an underground city just for them? Flight 19 of December 5, 1945. 5 bomber craft on a routine training run became lost while heading back and eventually disappeared entirely. Audio has them saying that they thought they had ended up over the Florida Keys. But wind could not have allowed that. Even more interesting is the fact the rescue craft dispatched to locate them also disappeared. The toxic death of Gloria Ramirez. 23 people became ill due to her mere presence and 5 were hospitalized. We have never worked out what happened. There's an episode of the Stuff You Should Know podcast that talks about it. Greater than about 8:15 p.m. on the evening of February 19, 1994, Ramirez, suffering from severe heart palpitations, was brought into the emergency department of Riverside General Hospital by paramedics. She was extremely confused and was suffering from tachycardia and Shane-Stokes respiration. Greater than the medical staff injected her with diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam to sedate her. When it became clear that Ramirez was responding poorly to treatment, the staff tried to defibrillate her heart. At that point, several people saw an oily sheen covering Ramirez's body. And some noticed a fruity, garlic-like odor that they thought was coming from her mouth. A registered nurse named Susan Kane attempted to draw blood from Ramirez's arm and noticed an ammonia-like smell coming from the tube. Greater than she passed the syringe to Julie Gorchinsky, a medical resident, who noticed manila-colored particles floating in the blood. At this point, Kane fainted and was removed from the room. Shortly thereafter, Gorchinsky began to feel nauseated, complaining that she was lightheaded. She left the trauma room and sat at a nurse's desk. A staff member asked her if she was okay. But before she could respond, she also fainted. Maureen Welch, a respiratory therapist who was assisting in the trauma room, was the third to pass out. The staff was then ordered to evacuate all emergency department patients to the parking lot outside the hospital. Overall, 23 people became ill and 5 were hospitalized. A skeleton crew stayed behind to stabilize Ramirez. At 8:50 p.m., after 45 minutes of CPR and defibrillation, Ramirez was pronounced dead from kidney failure related to her cancer. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.